It's not that sort of interview, Richard. Don't worry about it.
No need to get naked then.
Preferably not. No, we haven't been cancelled yet.
That would be a great intro, wouldn't it?
You before you record.
Auto trader laid bare.
Welcome back to Roadmap, Auto Trader UK's product and tech podcast. I'm Nathan Hewlett, the principal product designer here at Auto Trader, and for today's episode, it's my pleasure to be joined by two colleagues, Richard Hampshire and Conor Mackey, who are both senior creative copywriters here at Auto Trader. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, I am fortunate enough to have worked with you both to some degree, so I've got a rough idea of what you guys do. But for anyone who doesn't know, like what is a creative copywriter?
Ooh, what a question to start with. I don't know. It's quite open, really. It depends how into it you want to get. On a very sort of like general level, copy is just any of the writing that we do for Auto Trader. So everyone deals in copy, but a copywriting, I guess, we're doing more of a sell. It's not always a hard sell, but we're trying to like market stuff, we're trying to advertise stuff, we're trying to get consumers, retailers, whoever it may be, to engage with what we're doing and elicit some sort of response. I guess that's it as a more sort of general view of it, would you say?
Yeah, and maybe just to build on that, if I share what I believe is the origin story of copywriting, which is back in the olden days when everything was black and white, and in America, door-to-door selling was a big thing. So people would be going around the Midwest, knocking on doors, selling encyclopedias, whatever it was. Some bright spark realized the postal service was pretty good, and it might save a lot of time if we just started writing to people. So that started the process of direct marketing, writing to people instead of sending someone out, knocking on doors. So, and then obviously that naturally spun into some writing works better than others. And that is, I believe, how copywriting started. Moved on a little bit since then. And I wasn't actually around then.
No, that's really interesting. I never knew that was the origin, the whole like Tupperware into. I guess that's the first thing that comes to my mind when you talk about sales marketing and a door-to-door step. So how did you two get into copywriting? Like, what was your journey into this role?
Oh, God. I just kind of fell into it. I did like English literature at university. Was sort of like, I guess I'll become a teacher.
Is that the natural progression?
Yeah, natural progression. Yeah. It's that thing where people go like, "So you're going to be a teacher?" Then I'm like, no. But then I'm like, maybe I have to. But no. Then I just stumbled across sort of a job listing for a copywriter, and I was like, don't know what this is. I naturally just assumed it was something to do with copyright, but it wasn't. And that was with JD Sports. So I kind of got into it there, found my feet, went to a business called AO, so electricals, all that sort of stuff, sort of really, started building my craft, I guess, and just learning the ins and outs of, everything to do with copywriting, that it's not just, a case of being given a brief and sort of writing some words that reflect that. It's all the sort of tonal stuff that goes alongside it, and then I've ended up here, so that's kind of my journey, really.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I was telling my fiance that I was coming on to do this today with you two, and I told her what your job titles were, and the first thing she said, she went, "Copywriting, isn't that like really boring?" I was like, "No." She was getting it confused with like trademarking and copywriting.
Maybe she wasn't. Maybe she just.
Maybe she's just like.
By the end of it, she was really excited. But what about you? What about yourself, Richard?
So I think we call it squiggly careers here, don't we? So mine was pretty squiggly. I was doing a sales job at The Guardian, and then that became a sales job at the Manchester Evening News. Then became writing features at the Manchester Evening News, and that became, I was a freelance writer, and my partner, she was a copywriter at an agency, went freelance. Yeah. And then we just started swapping jobs. It turned out I was better at the advertising copywriting, and she was better at the long form feature writing. So that's how I got into it, and then eventually set up my own agency and was the writer there for 20 years, as well as a few other things in the business. So yeah, that's my journey into it. So pretty squiggly.
Nice. So creative copywriting then as a role, again, like I said, having worked with you both to some degree, I've got like a very top level view of what that is. How does creative copywriting, like how does that manifest itself across like the many different areas of Auto Trader? Like where do you guys inject yourself into? Or are requested?
Yeah, maybe let's not say inject ourselves.
I'm trying to use my
perhaps.
vocabulary here, if you can tell.
Yeah, prefer not to inject, but how we show up.
Yeah.
First on that.
Yeah, I guess just wherever we can, really. We just try and go, what's happening over here?
Yeah.
But realistically, like I know, sort of copywriting as an area within Auto Trader is fairly new. So I know the business as a whole is maybe still getting to grips with our existence. But it's just whenever any sort of area of the business, it could be sort of trade, it could be sort of consumer facing stuff, internal stuff to do with the networks. It's wherever there's a sort of need for us in terms of to come in and sort of deliver a sort of engaging messaging, or to be able to actually it's more than that, isn't it? It's like a lot of the time the briefs are kind of very general, so it's kind of put to us to kind of work out where it would go, which is obviously the sort of stuff we want to do. It's sort of like this creative ideation and how we can sort of deliver the messaging alongside other aspects of creative. And obviously we're within the studio, so we're kind of trying to sort of make sure we're as integrated as possible and sort of take on work as it comes through the studio as well. But it's very far reaching. Like I imagine we'll have touch points at all parts of the business,
for sure.
over the years. But yeah,
and as Conor says, it's a process, because it's a relatively new skill at Auto Trader, because everyone's putting words down, but we haven't had copywriters in before. So it's a process of working with people and them going, okay, yeah, that is better. We'll come to them again next time. So it's just a process of gaining confidence in different channels, everything from recruitment to consumer advertising, the whole. So we can be useful everywhere because there's always a story to tell. There's always a way of coming at things that we can help with. So it's a gradual sort of interesting process of building confidence.
Yeah.
And that has been across pretty much every area of the business.
No, for sure. I think because of obviously like my role working in like product and tech and being probably more familiar with the role of a UX content designer, I'd kind of had my own assumptions of what you guys did. Again, very, very top level. But I think, a lot of that probably came into my understanding, just my naivety in understanding what your role was, because I think I'd make an assumption that it's very much, it's like the stuff we write for TV campaigns or radio adverts or, any print material that we still do. I think that was probably my first understanding of kind of what it was. And I think a lot of things that play into that is like tone of voice and how we communicate as a brand, which obviously plays a very, very important role. How do you kind of take a brand like Auto Trader or any organization for that matter, and like how do you give it a voice? Like what does that process look like?
Oof, that's a big one.
We're in the middle of that.
Chunky ones today.
Yeah.
Maybe we're 3/4 the way through that project. Yeah. The first thing was to just identify that whether we like it or not, it's not a luxury, a tone of voice. We've got one because everyone's writing with a tone of voice. First question to ask the business was, would it be useful if there was a more congruent tone of voice, like we sounded more like one brand and one business? So obviously that's not a difficult question to answer. Yes, it would be useful. So then it's a question of bringing a very siloed practice of writing where everyone just does their own thing effectively, start bringing that together. So it's kind of a multi-part process that we're in the middle of, which is like bringing writers together, working across the different disciplines of Auto Trader. So that's all happened. Agreeing what would be a tone of voice that is realistic and true to our brand character. So that's happened.
Yeah.
And then working out how that, the way we we describe it is, if you think of tone of voice as two separate things, voice is the commonality that we're looking for throughout the brand, and tone is how it flexes through different channel. And with Conor and Demi and Holly and Andrew, other writers in the business, we're working on how that flexes, working with channels themselves. And we're just in the middle of building that section of the tone of voice, which is like kind of a good practice examples of how that tone flexes. So that's where we are. The ultimate aim of a tone of voice would be around giving ourselves distinctiveness and allowing for a deeper connection with our users than just simply being here and serving information. So, but that's quite nuanced. And it's, if you think about color, for example, there's maybe 30 people that actually putting color into deciding that sort of stuff. There's hundreds and hundreds of people writing. So it's almost a culture-wide process of gradually, and we haven't started the conversion process, if you like, of selling that work in. That's just started. I think there's one, Holly's done one.
Yeah, we've done a few pilot sessions for a few different areas of the business just to give people a taste. And it's going to be a gradual process of getting everyone used to, these are our tone of voice tenants. This is how we want to sound. But like Richard said, it's all about the flex, and we're working with different, teams and areas of the business just to try and find where the balance is for them, because essentially we all want to sound like we're speaking from the same place.
Yeah.
But it's going to be almost like, the difference between someone having a very serious work call versus them being the silliest version of themselves on a night out. Still the same person, still the same voice, that same, feelings, who they are. So that's how we want it to be with Autotrader. Do we get to that point where we have that sort of identification through our voice and through how we look, and then ultimately that builds the brand, and that's where we want to be.
And that's shifting, I guess, across different touch points of like a consumer's experience.
It's shifting across
trader.
different touch points. It's shifting as our brand and product shifts. If 5 years ago we weren't as transactional, we didn't want people to do as much. So if we're just a brand that holds the space for other people to advertise, then we're clearly going to play less of a part. And it's less important that we have a voice, less important that we build trust, less important that we have connection. As we move towards the auto trader of doing much more online, where people might be sorting their part exchange, they might be reserving cars, they might be transacting, all of that, then it's not just holding the space. Then it'll really serve us to dial up trust and connection.
Definitely. For sure. You touched on Conor there when you kind of when we were touched on the tone of voice type stuff, like the connection, the connections that we make. And I think Autotrader being nearly 50 years old now, 1977, I believe we were founded. I think one of the things I'd probably make an assumption with is that whole history, heritage side of Autotrader, I feel like there's probably a lot we could play. I'd make an assumption there's a lot we could play into there. How does that kind of the history and heritage, I can't get my words out, the history and heritage of Autotrader, how does that kind of feed into your process? Does that make it easier to some degree? I'd have an assumption that there's like an avenue there that you can really just feed into, and it's a bit of a golden key to a degree. Yeah,
it definitely makes things easier, but I think it's almost perceived as a double-edged sword, because we've got 50 years of people knowing who Autotrader are, being familiar with Autotrader, the various different formats we've existed in, so magazine and everything else. So there's a level of, like what Richard was talking about, trust there, that's just kind of like baked in for all those years. And really what we want to do on like a day-to-day basis is sort of create an emotional connection. When we're, doing various different bits throughout all of the business, we're trying to sort of elicit a response and sort of get, underneath whatever it is we're talking about. So whether it's like a specific product, we're trying to get to like the root connection that people will feel with that, because we want them to like feel something rather than just be like, oh yes, this is a thing and this is what it does. We want them to sort of feel something with it, gain that familiarity with us, keep coming back. And obviously the heritage does wonders with that. I think it's just a case of having the confidence where we can as a business to actually push forward with that, and not sort of, maybe sort of focus on things that we're maybe overly worried about, potentially people thinking we're just a magazine or that we are a magazine. Because I think ultimately the people who grew up with us as a magazine and have that real sort of love for the magazine, they're aware that we're not a magazine anymore because they're like, they can't buy it anymore, but they still love Auto Trader. So yeah, it's just really trying to tap into that in the best way that we can and sort of bring it out and not lose touch with who we are just because we're shifting and now we're a tech business and we're, even more than just like a marketplace. We're so much more than that now. But yeah, just really kind of getting the most from that as possible.
Yeah, I imagine that's quite a difficult thing to do because, like you just mentioned, we're a tech business. When we're an automotive business, we're a tech business, and I think the fact that the technical side of it probably pushes us more to look at the future, kind of what's the next step, like trying to balance that with actually look at everything we've done behind us. How do we kind of play on the things that have got us to where we are today? Yeah. Like I know we were catching up earlier on, and I think one of the things I was saying to you is when I try and think of this element of, whenever I try and step into the shoes, on my understanding of what you guys do, like I'm quite romantic in the way I think about things. I think of everything as like an advert or a billboard, and that's probably where my process starts. And like, what's kind of like is there like a kind of distinct method that you guys will try and approach like a project or a campaign in?
Well, if you're talking about stepping into the shoes of our audience there, or I'm not sure if you're talking about the romanticism of what we used to be.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure what you said.
Probably more the latter.
Okay. And so that's sort of the romanticism of what we used to be. So that nostalgia is powerful, but it is the past.
Yeah.
And it's really important that consumers see us as a modern solution to car buying and selling. So if we dwell too much in a sort of whiskey brand kind of nostalgia moment, that isn't reflective of who we are. So I think it's just a creative challenge that we as a business haven't really managed. So we've just stayed away from the M word of magazine, or we've stayed away from heritage. Although we played with it at the conference, the idea that we're neither just innovation or just heritage. We're all of those things. So yeah, and in terms of how we would approach something like that, certainly we're as writers, we don't approach it with our agenda. We approach it with the agenda of the audience that we're writing to. So do they care that we used to be a magazine? Or, okay, if somebody cares a load that we used to be a magazine, maybe there's a playful way that we could touch upon it and just remind them of that we've always been there with a hand gently on their shoulder, helping them do all these great things that the magazine did and that we do now around choice and view of the market and all those important stuff that whether it's a bit of print or you're looking at it on screen, it's still a job that allows you to feel comfortable making a move in a sector that can make you feel quite nervous. So we still do. Yeah, I think it's less about whether it was paper or a screen and more about what we've always done for you.
Yeah.
Finding that thread.
No, I love it. One question I've written down here, and I think I've written this with my product people in mind, because I think they'd be really interested to know is around like metrics. How do we track metrics? Is one thing that as an organization we are very big on. We want to make sure we track everything. We want to make sure we know kind of the changes that we make, are they having a positive or negative impact? From a creative copywriting perspective, like what kind of do we track? Is the metrics to track? Does that become more difficult? Is it a bit more nuanced? Like how do we measure the success of a campaign?
Yeah, it's not always black and white in terms of like having data that we can refer to and have that guide exactly what we're doing. Obviously there's areas where that is the case where, you know, a sort of SEO type things where, you know, there are sort of terms and key terms that we need to lead into in terms of how we write stuff and position stuff. But I think a lot of the time it can end up being sort of, it's how we want to sort of position the brand more than, you know, data when it isn't really available. There's some things where it's not quite as tangible as that, where we just have to, you know, it's a new product. We've never marketed this before, you know, so we just have to approach it from the point of view of like, you know, who the audience are, what we can say towards this product, how we can get to sort of some underlying thread where people can make that connection with it, and then it kind of goes from there then. And there are bits of data that we will gather, you know, how it's performed, you know, we felt like it didn't do as well as we might have hoped, or it exceeded expectation, but it's always a bit of a balancing act, really. I think we always approach it from the point of view of kind of finding that underlying, you know, thing which will sort of engage people. I think we're not really putting anything, I mean, it's in a good way. We're not really putting anything into these things. We're more drawing things out to try and find the best way to position something for the business in a way that's going to work for us. And then, you know, if we've got data we can lean on, great. But a lot of the time we might have to go without. So, yeah.
I think data plays a bigger role in the performance advertising side. So if you think about writing probably falling in either the sort of brand camp, which is in general, you know, brand is a marketing concept. It is intangible. Lots of people try and measure it all the time, but a lot of that can be slightly dubious, the measurements anyway. So, and then there's a performance advertising side, which is highly measurable, and obviously, so data drives that type of writing from start to finish, less so the intangible stuff. But equally, I think it's really important to bear in mind, if something's intangible, it possibly makes us feel more uncomfortable because we can't measure it. Because we can't measure it doesn't mean it doesn't have a massive effect, and it doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means we're a little bit more uncomfortable with it. So, you know, if you think about trust, loyalty, love, peace, they're not easy to measure, but kind of matter in the world. So it's a question, if you focus all your attention on what's measurable, how much are you losing by doing that just because you're more comfortable in the measurable? So we play across both areas. Obviously, data then is a brutal judge of what works and what doesn't work. Intangible stuff, well, it's you know, that's harder to call.
I'd make an assumption that a lot of that is potentially more longer term as well. Like we'd understand
Absolutely
that. Like,
right.
you know, we probably
brand is for the few. If you're doing brand work, you're looking to create associations in the mind of users going forward. If you're doing the performance stuff, it's generally click now.
Yeah.
It's like catching people when they're falling. It's like you're there at that moment. So that is a completely different job.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm looking for this. Oh, there it is. It's like packaging
Just
on a
trying
shelf.
to grab them right there and
more
then.
than the sort of brand work. Yeah.
For sure. I've got to talk about the elephant in the room. We had our AT Mega Day last week. And a couple of talks that I went to, and even one of the keynote speakers was all around AI, the use of AI.
I've not heard of
What's
AI.
that thing?
Is it coming?
We've
heard of A Up.
A Up. Proper northern
That's
tone
different.
there. But yeah, obviously there was talks around kind of AI, the use of responsible use of it, how that starts to kind of feed into our like workflows and make us more efficient. From your perspectives, how has the rise of AI and tools like ChatGPT, how is that kind of impacting your role? How is that shaping your role going forward? Like, what does AI mean for you guys?
Well, I think, like, from my point of view anyway, like when AI started like really emerging in the past couple of years, you know, I did that sort of like interrogation of it and seeing like, well, how could this be useful on like a day-to-day basis? And, you know, I think there's some application sort of on our day-to-day or for like other copywriters if they choose to use it, but it's mainly more around, oh, these are some like sort of slight guidance and these are some tips. It doesn't really feel like it's sort of ever going to be like the meat of what we do. But I think where it is useful is in terms of this kind of like mass consistency of more sort of, I was saying like mundane tasks, but stuff that is not that exciting, but stuff that you need real consistency with. So I'm thinking kind of like alt text and things along those lines where it can really sort of generate exactly what you want at a level of consistency. But in terms of like our sort of high impact, gripping sort of headline messages or, things of that nature, I don't know whether it's going to be able to sort of create in the way that we're able to. I think it's almost just a bit limiting, like the, not to blow our own horns a bit, but, our grasp of metaphor and that sort of thing. Like, it's true though. You can really play into something. You can really sort of make a comparison, with our product update when we were talking about sort of the products being like superpowers and making that consistent sort of similarity there, like that's something that is very specific, and the AI would falter to do that with. Ultimately, I think it can be a useful sort of aid, if you are really stuck or you just want sort of like general ideas. But yeah, I don't see it ever sort of coming in and taking our place.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, as it's been said many times, these models are at the dumbest they're ever going to be. They're only getting better. So who knows quite where we'll end up. But equally, there's a couple of things just to pick up on what Conor was saying there. The support, leaning into people who are a little bit unsure of what a brand's tone of voice. No doubt a large language model that they can run things through that allows them to lean into the personality and tone of voice of the brand, allow them to feel a bit more confident and do the, I can't remember quite how you described that, but the coming together of sort of brand voice. So definitely a useful tool that we'd like to work towards building here. So that's a great tool. The other thing that kind of touched on there was the distinctiveness that we're trying to bring to a piece of writing. Yeah. And as you say, maybe it was the superpowers, but the positioning of co-drivers, this is not AI. This is auto trader intelligence. It's not about a car. It's about your car, because I don't think AI is going to criticize itself in that way. So if we're looking for distinctiveness, a tool of kind of mass plagiarism, which is unlikely to create distinctiveness. In fact, it has the danger that it's spitting out facsimiles of itself for many, many different brands. And if we're in the game of having an element of distinctiveness, then that may not serve us, but who knows what's going to happen in the future.
No, I definitely agree. I think there's a couple of things.
I've seen Terminator 1, 2, 3, 4, and there was a clear message in it. Was a documentary, wasn't it? Yeah,
a documentary. No, I think there's a couple of things I'm definitely taking away from that, because I think one thing that stands out for me is, you've talked about like a lot of kind of what you guys do is make that emotional connection, and obviously AI being right now an emotionless thing, it's going to be difficult for it to kind of emulate that human side of things. But then going back to your point then, Richard, like I said, I think one of the reservations I personally have around the use of AI, particularly in your specific industry, is how do we become less, with kind of collectively as an industry, everyone kind of leaning more into these tools, how do we become less, or do we become less distinguishable from one another, and how do we ensure that we don't do that?
Well, I think we do that by not being overly reliant on things like AI. Like we said, we're trying to build our own identity, our own voice that's unique to us. And, but if we defer too much to sort of AI in order to help us with that sort of thing, we're all going to end up sounding the same. Other businesses in sort of our industry, if we're all asking AI the same questions, we're getting the same answers, in much the same way. We all become indistinguishable, and it doesn't benefit us. It doesn't benefit our competitors, really. So it's just about picking and choosing how you would like to use it. Like Richard said, and large language model is a way to go. Non-writers, we can feed all the data in the world into that to help it sort of get to grips with, what our tone of voice is, and then it can help people who aren't writers, for the main part of their role, and it can really serve a purpose there. But yeah, in terms of being distinctive, it's just not having that be the guiding force behind what we do and how we speak.
And I think that's so important for us going forward, because we have a real opportunity. Well, we are distinctive in our category.
Yeah.
We are different. We've got a world of kind of people telling you that they're going to minimize your choice and make it easy for you. And we kind of maximize choice and allow kind of a quiet place for you to make your own mind up with support. That's a completely different tone of voice. And that's a completely different type of writing, but it is also very nuanced, and it's all very nuanced through the different stages of our journey. Maybe AI is going to get brainy enough to sort all that out, think about where we want the brand to go in the future, think about how that will affect our writing. I think about maybe it'll be able to do all that, but at the moment, it absolutely doesn't.
Yeah. Well, let's hope.
So we're all right for a couple of years.
For a couple of years, yeah, for sure. All right, I think we are running a little bit short on time here, gents. So I'm gonna wrap this up. But before we do wrap this up, I've got a couple of quick fire questions for you. To both of you, what is your favourite and least favourite word when it comes to automotive copy, or just copy in general, actually?
Whoa. Do you have a magic word?
Oh God, I don't know a magic word. I can think of a few that I like, just for the sake of throwing some nice words out there, like juxtaposition. It's a nice one.
I don't think it'd be quite hard for us to work. It'd be quite hard to work that into I like curmudgeon. I think that's a nice word. That's something I'm working towards myself, being more curmudgeonly.
What does that mean?
It means being a sort of a grumpy old fart, really, and not wanting to go on holiday because of all the waits at the airport and all that sort of stuff. That's being a grumpy old curmudgeon. So I like some of that old-fashioned language. I think is quite sweet.
Curmudgeon. I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to spell that, Richard. I'm not going to lie.
Call your dad a curmudgeon.
Call my dad a curmudgeon. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Turn into an old curmudgeon, Dad.
I think he's already there, my dad, in all honesty.
Nice one. I'll get some tips.
What are your most memorable campaigns?
I mean, this is going way back. It shows the power of something if you nail it, that is so old. But do you remember Hamlet? It's like
Shakespeare.
Well, he's in a photo booth, and it's like, in the end, you need a cigar because your day's going so badly. And just as it's about to take, something happens and he falls and his wig falls off, and it's just that sort of gentle, sweet humour that ties into a sort of lovely product benefit of like, okay, I'm not encouraging smoking here, but the idea of the product benefit that life's tough, but at the end of it, at least there's a Hamlet, that, and that is that was just a very funny way of doing it.
Yeah.
So
not Shakespeare.
Just in general, I think what we've been talking about a lot recently, because it's kind of been fresh on our minds, is all the Uber campaigns.
Yeah, the other end of the extreme is Uber's doing a great campaign at the moment. So it's like their TV is like very human, full of northern warmth, very relatable, emotional, right back into product benefit, using the language of the product. Ties in outdoor TV, all works together. Yeah. Compelling, charming, damn, they're useful. So rational, emotional, all working together. That's current advertising that's smashing it. I mean, you like the food stuff as well.
I like the food stuff as well. Yeah, I think one of a memorable one is always like the old Yorkie adverts, which obviously they wouldn't get away with now, but you know, that kind of it's not for girls, and
Yeah.
then they're trying to sort of bait people into being like, well, I'll buy what I bloody well want. But also things I think like taglines like once you pop, you just can't stop with Pringles, which I've noticed they've had to stop now because
So they did stop.
yeah, probably because
Too much.
yeah, someone probably went, this is maybe encouraging people to, you know, finish off a tube in one go.
Which everyone did. That beautiful product truth. You couldn't stop eating them, even though they're slightly revolting, and you would feel ill afterwards.
Yeah, work for Pringles, but yeah. So that I guess that's just speaking to a truth there. That just resonates with people where you're just like, I could eat all these crisps.
Yeah, I can relate to that. 100%. I mean, I can definitely relate to that as well. Right, gentlemen, that is it today. That is it for today. Big thank you for coming on the show, on the couch. Thank you to all the listeners for tuning in and listening to this episode. If you want to reach out to any of us individually, I'm sure you can find us on LinkedIn. Just Google us. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Remember to hit the notification button so you never miss an episode. Follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and see you for another episode soon.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
Thank you, gents.